When the people of Israel rejected their God and demanded a king, they didn't fully know what or who they were asking for. The men that ruled them would be heroic and hedonistic, brave and broken, faithful and flawed. The crown became both glory and grief. But every flawed king, every failed reign was a shadow, a whisper of the only king who wouldn't just rule them, he'd redeem them.
We are in the midst of this series on the Kings, and so I'm going to let Tim Mackey from the Bible Project kind of tell us where it is that we have been so far and where we are today. So let's watch this.
No sooner does Solomon finish the temple that he makes some really horrible choices and the kingdom falls apart. He starts marrying the daughters of other kings, hundreds of them, for political alliances. And then he adopts their gods and introduces the worship of those gods into Israel. Solomon then accumulates huge amounts of wealth. He builds a huge army. He even institutes slave labor for all of his building projects. Now, if you go back to the Torah and look at God's guidelines for Israel's kings in Deuteronomy 17, Solomon is breaking every one. So by the time that he dies, Solomon resembles Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, more than he does his father David. The next section of the book opens with Solomon's son, Rehoboam, acting just like his father. It's a very sad story of greed and lust for power. He tries to increase taxes for slave labor. And under the leadership of Jeroboam, the northern tribes reject this, they rebel and secede, and form their own rival kingdom. And so now in the story, you have the southern kingdom, Judah, centered in Jerusalem with kings from the line of David, and now this new northern kingdom called Israel, whose capital will be Samaria eventually. Jeroboam also goes on to build 2 new temples to compete with Solomon's temple in the south. He puts a golden calf in each one to represent the God of Israel. The connection to Exodus 32 and the golden calf, it's all quite explicit.
So Jeroboam is handed the kingdom directly from God. Jeroboam is not part of the line of David or anything like that. God chooses him specifically. 1 Kings chapter 11, starting in verse 29. This is the way it happened, how he got the kingdom. During that time, the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, met Jeroboam on the road as Jeroboam came out of Jerusalem. Now, Ahijah had wrapped himself with a new cloak, and the 2 of them were alone in the open field. Then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he had on. He tore it into 12 pieces, and he said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what Yahweh God of Israel says, I'm about to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand, and I'll give you 10 tribes. 1 tribe will remain his for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city I chose out of all the tribes of Israel." So there's funny math there, right? So you've got 11 tribes. We know there are 12 tribes of Israel. There's only 11 tribes here. The 2 explanations are Judah and Benjamin have pretty much united by this point. So you can say that there is 1 tribe. Some authors do. Some authors say still call them by 2 tribes. The other part of it is the Levites kind of live everywhere. They live amongst the people. And so you can have some Levites, a tribe of Levi living in Judah and some living in Israel. So we're not exactly sure exactly how the math got that way, but that's the way it is. So verse 38 of chapter 11. After that, if you obey all I command you, walk in my ways, do what is right in my sight, in order to keep my statutes and my commands as my servant David did, I will be with you. I will build you a lasting dynasty, just as I built for David, and I will give you Israel. Now let's be reminded here with our map of exactly what this looked like. We saw a little representation of it before. So Israel there in the north, Judah in the south. And once again, I just mentioned this briefly last week. Look where Jerusalem is, way, way up north. This is part of God's mercy. The intent is for the people of Israel to continue to come to Jerusalem and to worship in the temple. They're not going to start worshiping some other God. That's not what Yahweh had in mind. Yahweh wants them to come to Jerusalem. There's one temple. There's one God. There's one system. And he wants them to come and to be a part of that system in Jerusalem. God hands Jeroboam not just a throne, but the makings of a dynasty. He says, look, if you will just follow me, your name will become great. The idea, the similar language to what he says to David, the way David's name is great in Judah, your name will be great. Jeroboam, you just do what I am telling you to do. Now, in those days, the way that you lived on, the way you achieved immortality, they didn't think about heaven the way we do, or paradise or something like that. The way you achieved immortality in those days was for your name and your lineage to live on. And so when you were a conquering king and you came into a new city, the first thing you did was take a chisel and try to chisel the names of the king that you beat off the wall. If he had a big statue or sculpture to himself, you knocked the face off. You did not want any part of that king to live on because you had won. You had defeated him. You wanted your name to be perpetuated. So in their thinking, when your family dynasty continued and people mentioned your name, that was sort of like the way that you lived on. And this is what God says will happen to Jeroboam. He will make a name for him forever. So Jeroboam sits on a throne that is established by God, using authority that God gave him, knowing full well that Yahweh has a plan for him and exactly what he has to do. He is going to receive everything that he could ever ask for. All he has to do is to follow Yahweh and lead his people to do the same. Verse 28 of chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28. The king sought advice. And then he made 2 golden calves, and he said to the people, going to Jerusalem is too difficult for you. Israel, here are your gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt. And he set one up in Bethel and put the other in Dan. This is the northern part of the kingdom, the southern part of the kingdom. And this led to sin. The people walked in procession before one of the calves all the way to Dan. Jeroboam also made shrines on the high places and made priests from the ranks of the people who were not Levites. Jeroboam made a festival in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like the festival in Judah. The festival in Judah he's talking about is Passover. He offered sacrifices on the altar. He made this offering in Bethel to sacrifice to the calves he had made. He also stationed priests in Bethel for the high places he had made. He offered sacrifices on the altar he had set up in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month. He chose this month on his own. He made a festival for the Israelites, offered sacrifices on the altar, and burned incense. And remember, he sought advice to do all this. Okay, so he either got really bad advice, or he got really good advice, and he just chose to ignore it. And when he sets up these 2 alternate worship sites in Bethel and in Dan, he sets up these golden calves. And again, if you know a little bit about the Bible, you know that coming out of Egypt, the people are told by Aaron, here, worship this. I made a golden calf. Go ahead and worship this. They're not saying worship another god, and that's not what Jeroboam is saying. They wanted to worship a God they could see. They could see all the things that Yahweh was doing. That was not enough for them. They wanted something that they could look at, they could see, that they could touch. And so he makes them these gods. When he does that, there are 2 things that are going on. First of all, when you make a calf, calves in those days, it's really a bull, is what they're doing. The idea of a bull is a pedestal animal, which means that it would be cast, theologically speaking, they would often be cast to be the legs of sort of a table or a platform. They were seen as gods, but they were there because they were strong to hold up a platform that another god sat upon. So they're a little less. They're really small g God. They're also an emblem animal. That is, they don't represent all the attributes of God because they can't. So what is it that Jeroboam wants? What do bulls really do? Well, they're known for their strength, and they're known for, if you just let them do whatever they want to do, they're going to mate with everything that is in that field. They're known for being, for virility. They're known for strength. They're known for taking what they want, all these things. This is what Jeroboam wants from his God. And so he represents it. When I was in high school, maybe middle school, high school, I saw for the first time a painting that has become my favorite painting by Seurat, and it is called Le Grand Jeté. If that's not correct, I apologize to all the French speakers. I think that's what it's called. Pronounce it. It's basically Sunday in the Park is what we call it in English. And this painting became one of my favorites. It's featured prominently in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It was probably like the first time I ever saw it. And but I used to see it on like postcards and keychains, and people would, eventually screensavers and whatever. And, but I actually never saw the painting. Even though I lived in Chicago, I never actually went to the art museum to see it. And several years ago, we took our son to DePaul University to start in the art school there. And we went to the Art Institute. We walked into the Seurat exhibit. And we kind of came at it backwards, so I didn't see this at first. There were other Seurat stuff around. But I came around the corner, and there it was. And I was absolutely stunned. See, this is great, and this is nice and big. The actual painting that Seurat painted is on a canvas that is 10 feet by 7 feet. It's huge, and it just takes up this wall. But even seeing it like this is not really, it looks impressive, but here's what you miss. It took him 2 years to paint this because this is all painted with little tiny dots. He took dots and he colored everything in. Now, these are not like one color that he used. I mean, multiple colors. 2 years. It would take him days just to do this like little tiny cluster. It's beautiful. When you see this painting and you walk up to it, people put their glasses on and they get overwhelmed. There's a bench that, last time I was there, there's a bench that sits in front of you. You can just sit there and stare at it. Incredible. No matter how you present this, even big like this, when I walk up to it, this is all just like pixelated. I can't see all the dots. It's a pale comparison to the real thing. This is exactly why Yahweh says, don't make any images of me. You guys are not good enough artists, none of you are, to paint who I am, to present who I am. You cannot represent me, not the fullness of me. It is always going to be like this. Something we go, oh, wow, that's impressive. But until we stand before him in all of his glory, we won't really even understand how impressive it is. And yet, what does Jeroboam do? He presents God in this way, as just a piece of who God is, not the real thing. He also made up a new festival to replace the Passover, so the people would pilgrimage to those sites instead of going to Jerusalem. He replaced the celebration of the Passover, the most important day on the Jewish calendar, with a day that he made up. He just like picked a random day and was like, nope, this is the new Passover. God had chosen that day. Some of you may be familiar with the idea of a Rolex. A Rolex is like a luxury watch. And you have to have a lot of money to have a Rolex. It can be thousands and thousands. They run into the tens of thousands of dollars. But I promise you, there's a way easier way for you to get a Rolex. And this guy proved it. See, all you need is like a little hot glue gun and your Mickey Mouse watch. and some fake diamonds. And then you need a label maker. The label maker, I cannot stress enough, is very, very important. Because if you don't have the label maker, nobody's going to know what it is. But obviously, as we can all see, this is clearly a Rolex. Is it a real Rolex? Well, wait. Before you answer, look what it says. It says Rolex. Clearly, it's a Rolex, people. I don't know what you're looking at. This is what Jeroboam is doing. It's the Passover. That doesn't look like a Passover to me. No. Squint real hard. It's the Passover. I'm telling you. But just because you proclaim it so doesn't make it so. The third thing that Jeroboam did is he chose priests just from anywhere. Priests who were not from the tribe of Levi. And he called them priests. Maybe you have a child in your life, a kid, a grandkid or something, and they're really into Batman, and you tell them this is going to be great, you're going to have a real Batman kind of Christmas. And then it gets to Christmas Day, and they rip open the packaging, and they find this. See, now, to the untrained eye, you may be like, well, it's like the same thing. But you think the kids don't know? Super Bat is not Batman. I know he's got a cool skateboard. I know he has non-fall action, go forward and turn right automatically. I know, but that's not Batman. And this is what Jeroboam does. You're a priest now. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, here's some stuff that looks like you should be a priest, so here, put on the costume. I mean, that's what it is. Not exactly right. In fact, none of these things is exactly right, and this is part of the problem. Technically, he's telling people to worship Yahweh. Oh, no, you should come to Israel. See, in Israel, we worship Yahweh. You do? Yes, absolutely, we do. Except we're just, a little bit more open-minded than our neighbors to the south. We actually we have a representation of Yahweh that you can like walk up and touch. It's really awesome. And on top of that, we have way more priests. You can just if you want to be a priest, I can make you a priest. I can just make it happen. And we have Passover too. You don't have to go anywhere for Passover. Just stay here. Passover is great. All of these things, it's not go worship a false god, it's worship Yahweh, but all of them are just a little off. And when you stack up these things that are just a little off, after a while, the people of Israel are no different than the nations, the pagan nations that surround them. What happened? What happens? How do you fall so far so fast? How is it possible that you get met in a field by a prophet of God who does this really cool visual illustration? Everything happens exactly the way he wants to. You get to be a king of all things. You get everything handed to you exactly the way God said it's going to happen. And then you're like, no, I think I'm going to make a decision on my own. How does this happen? 1 Kings chapter 12, starting in verse 26. Jeroboam said to himself, the kingdom might now return to the house of David. I mean, if these people regularly go to offer sacrifices in Yahweh's temple in Jerusalem, the heart of these people will return to their Lord. King Rehoboam of Judah, he'll kill me. He'll go back to the king of Judah. Jeroboam chose to believe that what God has given, man can take away. That's a problem. Their Lord is very telling language in this. Oh no. If they keep going back to Jerusalem, they're going to go, oh, this temple's so nice. Have you seen our temple? Oh, your king did what? Wish our king would do that. oh, this is so nice here. Remember when we were all together and we like celebrated together and did things together, and oh, that was so nice, wasn't it? The only way to keep them from doing that is to make sure that they never go to Israel at all. And it all starts with this idea, I'm not a real king. Yeah, but Yahweh made you king. He anointed you. He's the one who said you were king. Yeah, I'm not a real king. The real king is related to David, and he's down there. I'm just an imposter. I know that. Yeah, but that's not what God said about it. It doesn't matter. Jeroboam's lack of trust contradicts God's promise. The Lord promised Jeroboam to establish his throne. If Jeroboam would just walk in obedience before him, that's all he needs to do. Jeroboam didn't become king by his own effort. He was actually in exile in Egypt. God called him back. He didn't survive the initial days of being a king by his own effort. God intervened. Last week we said Rehoboam gathered the army up to march out against Jeroboam and kill him. And God stepped in and went, nah, you're not doing that. This is from me. Jeroboam's my guy. And yet something happened. Jeroboam chose not to trust in Yahweh, but to trust in himself. I've got to protect myself. And then he gets advice, and he's got political advisors. What's the best thing, the smartest thing that we can do politically? Oh, well, let's make these moves and these maneuvers. Jeroboam feared his people would stop being loyal to him if they went to Jerusalem to worship. The anointed, crowned king of Israel, hand chosen by Yahweh, set on the throne, given the bulk of the kingdom, starts to believe that everything in his life is unraveling, not because it's actually happening, but because he believes that it could. And once you start believing that, oh, the wheels could come off this car, it's hard to get pulled back from the edge. Where did this fear come from in him? Well, he called it into being. Look, if a God is just something that we worship, it is clear that Jeroboam is worshiping his fear. He's nurturing it. He is bringing it along. It belongs to him and him alone. Here's the lesson for our lives in all of this. We have to believe in what God says is certain, not in what fear says is possible. We've got to believe in what God says is certain, not in what fear says is possible. Fear wants us distracted by unlikely outcomes, so much so that we start trying to control things. Because let me tell you something. You know your husband's not going to stay with you, right? I mean, not if you don't look better than you do. You know if you don't lose the weight, he's not going to stick around. You know that? You know your wife isn't going to stay with you. You gotta keep buying stuff. You got to buy stuff that she doesn't need to impress people that she doesn't even like. Well, she's not going to stick around. You know, your kids, there's no hope. You don't get into their lives and you don't inject yourself into every one of their situations. You don't pull every string that you have. If you don't fight all their battles for them, if you don't make the phone calls, if you don't maneuver and jockey for position, it's never going to happen for your kids. What, you think they're going to be okay? Hey, if you don't show up, you know it's all going to fall apart, right? You got to be there. Is fear. We start to believe that things that could happen are likely to happen. And we stop believing in what is certain to happen. What is certain to happen? Jesus said, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. I will be with you to the ends of the earth." He said, even in death, I'm going to a place to prepare it for you so that you can join me there. Nothing will be able to separate us from the love of God that is ours through Christ. Nothing on earth and physical realm, nothing in the spiritual realm. What's certain is that if God is for us, nothing can be against us. In fact, no weapon that gets formed can stand against us when God is there. What's certain is that we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. What's certain is that God will always give us a way out of any temptation, no matter how difficult it is. What's certain is that if we confess our sin, that God is faithful and just and will forgive us our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. These are the things that are certain. But why are we so prone to believe that other things are? When we live in those kinds of truths, when we live in the truths that come out of the pages of God's Word, when we put our trust in those truths, that anything that happens, even challenges and difficulties, we can see through a different lens. We see it as being just another way God is accomplishing His will in our lives. But Jeroboam did not believe that the God who gave him what he needed could be trusted to keep the kingdom in his hands. And so he ran his own play. We got to help God, you know. God needs my help. God needs me to give my input and my advice. I mean, He needs to know. If I don't help God, how's it going to work? Where are you running your own play right now? What are the things that you are trying to control? Now, none of us is a king, and so we hear this stuff, and we go, yeah, but all right, what's the big deal? You always get a new king. What's the big deal? Another king shows up on the scene, and you know, he might be a good one, and God will do good things then. So is this really that big a deal? One bad king does not a bad kingdom make. In 2 Kings chapter 15 and 17, we're getting in those two chapters kind of a summary of what's going on in the nation of Israel. And this is being written much later. Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel. And he did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. He did not turn away from the sins of his father Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Menahem, the son of Gadi, became king of Israel. He did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. And Pekahiah became king of Israel. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Pekah, son of Remaliah, became king of Israel. He did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Here's a summary statement 200 years later from 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 22 and 23. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until Yahweh removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. The foundation that Jeroboam laid was so corrupt and so filled with fear that 2 centuries later, his behavior brought the nation to its knees. So the question is, what do we think that fear and mistrust in God is going to do in our lives? What do we think it's going to do to our families? If it can take a nation out, whenever we talk about something like this, it's possible that something, as we are talking through it, something kind of comes to mind. Years ago, I had a friend who did very, very well in business. And I was talking to him one day, and I said to him, like, why are you still working? I happen to know you've done really well. You don't need to work anymore. He was young to retire, but I knew that he could. And I just said, look, what's the deal? Like, are you still working just because you like to? And he said, yeah, I don't know. I guess I like to work, so I'll work for a little while longer. I don't know how long. And I said, well, you had to have put money away. He said, yeah, I did. I don't know how much I have. I said, wait, you're a really good businessman. What do you know? What do you mean you don't know how much you have? He said, oh, I used to know exactly where all my money was to the penny. And I would be making phone calls all the time to my broker and changing things and shifting things. I got to do this, I got to do that. And I stopped doing that. I said, why? He said, because I found that I was waking up every morning looking at my money, just staring at it. And it started to control my life. And I started to believe that if I just make this maneuver and that maneuver, and if I just do this and take a little bit out of here and change the percentage, and it's going to make all the difference in the world. That may not be it for you. Maybe it's not a money thing. What are you controlling? There's a way for all of us to get rid of this thing in our lives, the thing that causes us to live in fear instead of living in what is true. And it's through confession. And so let's do that right now. Let's just go to prayer together. And as we go to prayer, we are going to practice confession. God, whether something came to mind or not, in this moment, we pray that you would bring something to our minds, something that we are intent on controlling, rather than on allowing you to have dominion over. God, we don't want to be the ones who run our own play. We don't want to be the ones who are up at night thinking about all the different angles, trying to figure stuff out. Because if we don't, it's all going to fall apart. God, have mercy on us if that's where we're living. So right now, we take whatever that thing is that's bringing up fear in us, and we lay it down at your feet. God, we don't want to live in it anymore. Help us to be able to let it go. And we cry out to you and to you alone. We believe you are a God who keeps his promises. And we declare that this morning. And we can pray all of this because of the name of Jesus and for the sake of his reputation. And all God's people said, amen.